Reducing workplace bias. The hindsight bias confirms the unhelpful view that we knew what was going to happen all along. The hindsight distortion gives us a false sense of our predictive powers, potentially influencing future decision-making and blinding us to the problems of prediction and our abilities. The lesson and meditation will help you have a more realistic view about your predictive capabilities, which will significantly enhance your thinking and decision-making. Have you ever experienced an event, typically one with a negative outcome, and said to yourself or another person, "I knew that was going to happen"? Of course, you typically don't go looking for your notes made a few weeks or months or years earlier that prove you predicted the whole thing because, well, they don't exist. It's easier to be right when you already know the answer. The problem is that as soon as the answer is revealed, it distorts your memory and perception of your past judgments. For example, you might have had a concern about a future outcome of a decision, but this might well be distorted as you look back and be turned from a minor concern into a major probability, if not an outright prediction. Knowing the outcome will likely turn you into a predictive genius, or seem like that. Okay, so most of us like to be right, and we will take advantage of any opportunity to prove it to be the case. However, that can be dangerous, because it can lead to very distorted views of your prediction abilities. You are likely to overvalue you and/or your team's prediction accuracy if you are constantly telling yourself you knew what was going to happen all along. We program our brains all the time, so we need to be mindful about what we are telling them. Moreover, even if you did accurately predict an outcome, how certain were you of the outcome before it actually manifested itself? Did you think it might be a possibility? Did you think other outcomes were also possible? How, if at all, did you weigh the various possibilities? This is not just about ego. This is about the specific and important skill of the ability to accurately predict outcomes. When you are involved in a group decision-making exercise, do you or anyone in the group make an attempt to get the group members to predict what will actually happen? Does anyone instigate the action of having all group members writing down their predicted outcomes? Ideally, such an exercise should not just be about various predictions, but each of those forecasts should be given a probability. So, for example, group members might predict the outcomes of the decision expressed as a probability. For example, one member might predict that there's a 55% chance that revenues will increase within 1 year of implementation, a 30% chance that they will stay the same, and a 10% chance that they will fall. Of course, one could also add layers of specificity and probability to the predictions. Not only would this minimize the chance that bias would subsequently distort the narrative about predictive accuracy, it would actually be a good measure of the accuracy of judgment, which might then inform better decision-making in the first place. Or it might reveal that some people are very good at predictions, or there are factors that need to be given more consideration in the decision-making process. The hindsight bias might also lead you to the false assumption that everything is predictable. Sometimes there are surprises that no one saw coming. Of course, we would like to think that we can minimize these mysteries, but it would be better off if we realize sometimes the unpredictable happens. And remember that the future is always unknown until it is revealed, but then it isn't the future anymore. As with other biases, the hindsight bias, as well as being a function of distorted perception, has the power to distort perception, and in this case, that might give you and your team unrealistic perceptions of your predictive and decision-making abilities. Meditation. Everything was such a damn nice idea when it was an idea. Tim O'Brien. Before you are wise. After you are wise. In between, you are otherwise. David Zindel. We go through the present blindfolded. Only later, when the blindfold is removed and we examine the past, do we realize what we've been through and understand what it means. Milan Kundera. The hindsight bias makes surprises vanish. Daniel Kahneman. The hindsight bias can blur the distinction between the present and the future, and can foster the idea that we can or should be able to predict the future. Even when one has accurately predicted the future in the past, that doesn't mean that the future is predictable. The present is the present, and the future is the future. There's an idea, a prediction, and an outcome, which are all independent events. Everything was such a damn nice idea when it was an idea. A decision is made at a certain point of time. Many variables, both known and unknown, influence the outcome of that decision. We go through the present blindfolded. Only later, when the blindfold is removed and we examine the past, do we realize what we've been through and understand what it means. We can try to predict the future, and sometimes we might get it right. But there are many unknowns between the present and the future. You didn't know it all along. You guessed it all along. You can only know it once it has been revealed. And remember that the future is always unknown until it is revealed. But then, it isn't the future anymore. We go through the present blindfolded. Only later, when the blindfold is removed and we examine the past, do we realize what we've been through and understand what it means. The hindsight bias makes surprises vanish. The hindsight bias can give you a very false sense of your talents. The future is always unknown until it is revealed, but then it isn't the future anymore. We go through the present blindfolded. Only later, when the blindfold is removed and we examine the past, do we realize what we've been through and understand what it means. Before, you are wise. After, you are wise. In between, you are otherwise. Reducing workplace bias.